The Powder Gangers are a gang of escaped convicts, terrorizing the Mojave with highway robbery and high explosives. In the final game, they act as little more than early game target practice. However, like most of FNV, the faction was once planned to be grander. This is the untold tale of the Powder Gangers. To begin, there are 4 Powder Ganger NPCs used for testing that remain in the game files. Interestingly, 2 of these NPCs are female. This suggests that the gang was originally going to include women members, but this was seemingly cut early on in development, as there's no other trace of it. The Powder Gangers have an unused armor texture of a hood. The only other trace of this item is shown in their reputation icon. Inside the prison, there are 2 markers used to enable Powder Ganger and NCR soldiers. However, there's a 3rd marker utilizing the same naming convention, but it references the Legion. During one of the possible ending slides, the Legion conquers the prison, so I suspect this marker was intended to enable Legion soldiers after the Second Battle of Hoover Dam. There's an unused cell called NCR Prison Block C. There's nothing here worth mentioning, but it's likely that some of the cut content we're about to discuss would have taken place here. Interestingly, there isn't room for another prison block on the final map, so the prison was likely compressed at some point in development, possibly due to console limitations. The NCRCF script reveals that the Powder Gangers once held hostages at the prison. Further, you could have helped them escape somehow, as there are unused variables that track their escape. Perhaps rescuing them would have been an optional objective before starting the NCR's attack. Guard dogs were also meant to appear at the prison. As part of the Sniffer faction, they can see through disguises and alert other NPCs. This would have made getting the hostages out alive much more difficult. During the quest, I Fought the Law, the player is sent to investigate a water merchant. It's later revealed that this water merchant is actually a bounty hunter, and he was originally going to have 2 bodyguards alongside him. These cut NPCs are still placed near Goodspring's source, but are disabled. This suggests that the encounter was going to take place here instead. The bodyguards also have an unused AI package for ambushing the player. The Powder Gangers were planned to attack you for trespassing near their camps. The dialogue for warning the player about this is still in-game.
Hey, I've been sent to tell you that, while you're not exactly a friend, we know you've helped us out some all the same. We figured some kind of truce is in order. As long as you don't come too close to any of our camps, we'll let you pass without trying to kill you. Of course, the truce is off once we know you're an enemy. Then we'll have to make you leave by force. Your own fault, you understand?
However, not all of the NPCs at these camps were given guard packages, and most of the camps don't have guard locations, so none of this is functional. Similar to Nellis Air Force Base or Camp Forlorn Hope, the player was intended to help out various NPCs around the prison. V Freeform NCRCF Hannigan note reveals that Hannigan wanted the player to find a book on medicine. The NCRCF script adds that you could have taught him yourself, likely by passing a medicine check. He mentions that he was only an NCR medic for 6 months, so perhaps completing this quest would have unlocked options to cure addiction, purge radiation, or even improved his inventory. During the quest I Fought the Law, Eddie sends the player to kill Chavez, a powder ganger who has formed his own separate gang. This unused note reveals that he was initially going to spawn inside the prison instead of Powder Ganger Camp South. He was still trapped in a cell and needed the player to break him out. Assuming Chavez would have betrayed Eddie afterwards, this would have added an interesting layer to the quest. Carter would have asked the player to crack a safe, presumably the one in the warden's office. There's also an unused variable called One of Us. This suggests you wouldn't have been able to trade with Carter right away like you can in the final game. Instead, trading with him would have been a reward for reaching a reputation milestone with the faction. Dawes would have asked you to repair a generator, and it likely would have restored power to the prison. Unused player lines show that Eddie was going to send the player to scout the number of NCR forces at Primm. When returning, you could have lied about how many soldiers there were. Perhaps this would have made some of the convicts desert, but that's just speculation. Alternatively, the player had options to offer improvements to the prison's defense. The second player line here is particularly interesting, as there are Powder Ganger snipers on each guard tower. This implies that they wouldn't have appeared until the player suggested it.
Not much, just killed a bunch of people, maybe a couple kids too, whatever.
There was a cut quest centered around Eddie's bodyguard, Scrambler. Now, most of Scrambler's dialogue was deleted along with this quest, but we can still infer a bit about his character. The generic Powder Gangers mention this.
Scrambler's crazier than usual. Watch yourself.
While an unused note also references him, reading, "I'm taking most of the boys west to check out the vault we heard about. Stay here and keep an eye on things until we get back, and keep a closer eye on the fiends. Those guys are crazier than Scrambler. If there's any trouble, radio ahead." So I think we can safely assume that Scrambler was going to be an unhinged and generally disliked character. At some point after arriving at the prison, Scrambler would have asked the player to kill Eddie. A significant amount of time and effort was put into this quest, and it would have functioned similar to Arizona Killer. First, the player could have lured Eddie to the guard tower right outside the administration building. The marker still remains from where you could have pushed him over this tower. Since his death would have looked like an accident, perhaps this method would have had the least consequences. You also could have asked Scrambler for help. There are several unused NPCs from Scrambler's personal gang that would have joined you in ambushing Eddie. Finally, there's a third option that involved initiating a prison lockdown by hacking a cut terminal NCR prison terminal. It was notably first hacked by Scrambler. This is interesting because it implies that he assisted with the prison breakout in a significant way. Activating this lockdown would have reset the targeting data of cut turrets that were placed throughout the prison. Scrambler also has an unused AI package to travel to NCR Prison Block A when the lockdown was initiated. So in conclusion, the player would have activated the turrets, killing Eddie and anyone else unlucky enough to be nearby, while Scrambler hid away in safety. After Eddie's death, it's unknown what would have happened next. Perhaps Scrambler would have taken over as a more vicious crime boss. Maybe the Powder Gangers would have been left in disarray and without leadership. Regardless, it's plausible that killing Eddie would have changed the outcome of I Fought the Law, or perhaps even the Powder Gangers' ending slides. You probably could have warned Eddie of this betrayal and killed Scrambler instead. This line seems to reference that outcome of the quest.
Man, I'm glad Scrambler's gone.
The NCRCF script also mentions frame rate issues when the lockdown was active during the NCR's attack. This suggests that the turrets could have been used to assist the powder gangers in the battle. In the final game, the powder gangers are annihilated by the NCR unless you intervene. But this content reveals that helping out around the prison would have evened the odds, or even shifted them into the convicts' favor. These additions would have gone a long way in fleshing out the powder gangers, and made siding with them a much more viable and interesting choice. Ultimately though, all of this was left on the cutting room floor.